This is the black cherry, an American tree species that has spread invasively in Western Europe over the past century. And for a long time people thought that this was because it doesn't have any native natural enemies. But when you look at herbarium records over the past century, you see that more and more insects have started feeding on the black cherry. And actually nowadays we found that there are more different species of insects eating from this tree than from the native bird cherry. We also found that some specialized insects have evolved, have changed genetically to adapt to this new food source. And we think that over time this may help to control the invasive character of the black cherry. You can read all about this research in our latest publication in the journal PeerJ.
In 2006, a trophy hunter shot what he thought was a polar bear in the Northwest Territories of the Canadian Arctic. But what he killed instead was something never before documented in the wild. A bear with the white fur of a polar bear, but the long claws, humped back, shallow face, and brown patches of fur like a grizzly. This was definitely not a typical bear. Officials seized the creature, its species unknown and under question. A DNA test was conducted and led them to discover it was neither a grizzly or a polar bear, but a hybrid, with a polar bear mother and a grizzly bear father, the first ever discovered in the wild. And while this hybrid, which is now called a pizzly or a growler, was a rare discovery, it may be just the beginning of an era of these hybrid bears. Since then, sightings of the hybrids have been increasing, with a 2017 study showing 8 hybrids springing from a single female polar bear who mated with 2 grizzly bears. But it's not just the bears. In 1990, a scientist noticed a very strange skull hanging on an Inuit hunter's wall. It looked like neither a beluga whale skull nor a narwhal skull, but something in between. Later genetic analysis would show that the skull belonged to a narwhal-beluga hybrid, the first ever confirmed case. Hybrids are commonly thought of as an interesting anomaly, but besides that, evolutionarily useless. The thinking has always been, even if a hybrid can exist, that's the end of the line, since hybrids themselves are thought to be incapable of producing offspring. But now, scientists are understanding that there's more to the story. And in the current state of the world, experts think we might be entering a new era of hybrid animals. Hybridization can create new species much faster.
Camels and llamas, so different and living on different continents, yet able to breed together and produce young. Examples abound of species that can be bred together. Zebras with horses, tigers with lions, potatoes with hot peppers, and so on. This amazes biologists. Based on modern rates of change, new species should quickly lose their ability to interbreed with other species. So, modern species that interbreed must have formed recently and rapidly. It's amazing that camels and llamas, though separated by oceans and thousands of miles, came from the same parents in relatively recent times. Then we could understand how a single pair of cats could produce all known cats. Today, crossbreeding between domestic cats and wild cats, between cougars and leopards, between lions and tigers indicate that all modern cat species are the same created kind. The original cat kind carried all the information necessary to build the variety of cats we see today. So how could such major changes have arisen so rapidly? This is a mystery to biologists.
Squids are shrinking, birds are migrating, lizards are getting blown away by hurricanes. The signs are everywhere. Animals are changing.
But few people expected it to happen so fast.
About 2,500 miles away, a series of marine heat waves swept through the Gulf of California, warming the surface temperature of the water and impacting various species, including the Humboldt squid.
Humboldt squid are also known as jumbo squid because they grow so large. They can be 3, 4, 5, even 6 feet in length. Fishers in the Gulf of California were the first people to notice that something had changed when they stopped catching the Humboldt squid. When the scientists arrived to study this situation, they found that in fact the Humboldt squid were still there and in some places more plentiful than before. What had changed was their lifestyle and their body. These were not immature or juvenile squid. They were Humboldt squid at full size, reproducing and carrying out their lives in half the time they used to.
Dr. William Gilly and his team measured the squid they caught and found a reduction of 50% or more in their body size in response to the stress of the higher water temperatures. This adaptation is known as plasticity.
Plasticity is already built into the genome of a species. It's already there.
From the warm waters of Mexico, we travel to the frigid north to study another example of plasticity, behavioral plasticity, in the feeding patterns of this Arctic bird.
I think we're all familiar with that iconic climate change image of the polar bear stranded on a shrinking iceberg. But if you could look beyond the bear to the edge of the ice, you might catch a glimpse of a tiny seabird called the little auk or dovekie. Dovekies feed along the edge of the ice floes where there are a lot of plankton, and that has been their strategy for thousands of years. It worked just fine until the ice floes began to shrink and retreat farther and farther from the islands where the dovekies breed. And you can imagine, as that ice gets farther and farther away, the dovekies have longer and longer to travel to reach a place where they can get food for their offspring. And they have long been predicted to be an early casualty of climate change.
French scientist David Grimley and his team placed transmitters on the birds and wondered how long they would need to fly to their usual plankton meal, which was now far away at the edge of the retreating ice.
So when they gathered around to collect the first batch of data from their transmitters, they were astounded. Because instead of flying an hour, the dovekies had been in the air for less than 4 minutes. David and his team realized that the dovekies had found a new food source right on their very doorstep. At the mouth of the fjord, where the milky blue meltwater from island glaciers was slamming into the dark, cold currents of the Arctic Ocean and creating this place of plenty for the dovekies to feed upon the stunned plankton.
The dovekies continue to thrive by being flexible enough as a species to switch up their traditional feeding patterns and adapt quickly to a changing environment.
Plants and animals all over the world adapting their behaviors, sometimes changing their bodies, sometimes even evolving in response to climate change. We can take inspiration from plants and animals in terms of our own response to the crisis. After all, if a tiny lizard can evolve in response to climate change, then it stands to reason we can change some of the behaviors that are bringing it about.